I find this a bit ironic. Today's game actually came in a collector's set with all 3 games in the series, along with manuals for all 3 games. However, someone neglected to point out during production of this box set that the jewel case for this game already has the game manual in it. So there were technically 2 copies of the manual in the box. Yeah, they seriously did this with every one of these collection boxes. I think a part of the reason for the mistake is because the manuals for the second and third games are actually much taller and thus don't fit in the jewel case. Still, you'd think someone would have caught this.
I'll leave this on. I don't suppose the moths will annoy him now. At least I won't have to wash the windows today. Nice big sign, but I guess we should have used the boards to make a front door. My old sandbox makes a great planter. I'd like to see the gophers try to get to my flowers now.
Today in Ancient DOS Games, we have a curious adventure title which is atypical to the norm, called The Legend of Kyrandia, Book 1, Fables and Fiends. Kinda like last week, I can't say I'm very fond of this game, though at least in this case, I don't like the game for minor reasons, and I found it more enjoyable than Little Big Adventure for sure. Part of the reason I didn't enjoy this game is because of how very differently it plays to a typical adventure game, and looking at the gameplay right now, you must be thinking I'm out of my mind when I say that. Well, you do indeed move around with the mouse, click on things to interact with them, have an inventory to manage and all that jazz, but there's 2 unusual mechanics this game has which infuriate myself in particular, even though they're potentially selling points and seemingly ingenious to others. What I'm trying to say is that this game does not play like a typical adventure game, and thus knowing what you'll be getting yourself into ahead of time will alleviate a lot of the frustration if you try to go through it without a walkthrough.
This window looks great.
This is Brandon, you old dolt.
The Legend of Kyrandia, Book 1, was developed by Westwood Studios, mostly known nowadays for the Command & Conquer series, and was published through Virgin Interactive in 1992. Though I should point out that the publisher details are surprisingly difficult to find on the packaging and are completely absent from the game itself. Something I think was remedied when Dune 2 came along. It's a one-player inventory-based adventure game, and has separate support for MCGA and VGA graphics modes, as I believe it does some extra stuff in its VGA mode in order to render to the screen faster and more smoothly. It also supports a bunch of different audio cards and sounds absolutely amazing with an MT32 for the music. Though what you're hearing in the background is just the Sound Blaster synth. It's the easiest one for me to set up and record. As for its current release date, it's still commercial and easy to obtain. Once again, from the Good Old Games website at www.gog.com for $6 on its own, or $15 if you get all 3 games in the series together at the same time. I do realize a lot of the stuff I've been covering lately is available on GOG, but hey, that place was purposely designed to breathe new life into all these old games, so if that's the place to go for digital downloads nowadays, well, there you go. As for physical copies, the CD itself can be found fairly easily and cheaply, going for around $10 to $15. Loose discs go for more like $20 to $25, as the diskette release wasn't as widespread as the CD-ROM release. And if you find a fully boxed copy, they're not rare, but the prices can really get up there, with the minimum price you can expect to pay being around $40 to $50, even for the collection of all 3 games, as is the one I have. Also, keep in mind there were Amiga releases of these games, but they're much harder to find and much more expensive when you do.
Malcolm the Jester is broken free. He now controls the Kyra source of all the magic in Kyrandia.
Despite being an inventory-based adventure game, you'd think there'd be a heavy story to this thing. But actually, the story's quite simple. Basically, there's this island known as Kyrandia, which is rich in magic thanks to an artifact known as the Kyra Gem. However, one day, Malcolm, the king and queen's court jester, goes mad, using his powers to kill the king and queen in an attempt to overthrow the land, but is imprisoned within the castle using the Kyrogem's powers. Time passes and Malcolm's power grows even stronger, weakening the barrier around the castle. He ultimately breaks free and finds the Kyrogem, thus immediately limiting the magic of all of the mystics of the island, including the one who imprisoned him in the first place, Calic, who was father to the king and grandfather to the game's main protagonist, Brandon. For reasons which aren't really made clear, Brandon's royal lineage was hidden from him, as he grew up thinking he was just an everyday sort of person. But right as the game begins, he goes up to see Calic, only to discover him turned to stone, thus beginning an adventure filled with magic as Brandon traverses all across the island trying to find who's responsible and to bring them to justice. The one thing I want to quickly point out though before I get into the gameplay is that a big part of the reason I don't enjoy this game is actually the protagonist himself. I find Brandon to be a bit of an idiot, and I know a lot of the ways in which he makes himself out to be foolish has to do with the player making him do dumb things, but then you have lines like this one which are part of the story.
She wants me to get flowers? Grandfather is a rock. He needs help, not sympathy.
And I just want to slap him and be like, you live in a world filled with magic and you can't even grasp the concept that flowers could be used for spellcasting? Oh, and just to drive the point home, here's another amazingly stupid thing he does which you absolutely must do to progress through the game.
Oops.
He's also kind of a bully too. I just really don't like this guy. So the basic gameplay here is as you would expect from any adventure game. You click on things with the mouse to interact with them. There are in fact no keyboard controls at all when you have mouse controls activated. Actually, you can't even skip dialogue and cutscenes as far as I can tell, so yeah, that's just one of the minor issues I think we can all agree is kinda annoying. However, the rest of the issues I'm going to bring up are actually debatable, though before we can discuss them, there's a couple mechanics you need to know about. Firstly, you can pick up and drop items almost the same as icons on a desktop. You have an inventory you can store items into, but it only holds up to 10 items, so you can also drop items into the world anywhere you want and pick them back up later. Or sometimes you may not even want to ever pick them back up, as is the case with the fire berries in the caves later on. That's actually a section of the game notorious for being far too long, maze-like, death-filled, and monotonous, so yeah. However, there are also points in time during the game where you'll go to use an item and will actually lose that item without actually making any progress. When this happens, the item respawns elsewhere in the world, so you can walk around and find another to take with you if it's something you absolutely need, or sometimes certain sources of items can be used repeatedly, such as with acorns and blueberries. So you can ultimately get as many as you'll need, even though you really don't need that many. Given that you can't permanently lose items that you need, you'd think this would make the game far simpler to play. But in fact, it creates a situation where not only do you need to use a lot of trial and error to figure out some puzzles, but once you figure the puzzle out, you're forced to backtrack to re-find the stuff that you lost. Or what you could also do, once you know you're about to lose items, is save your game, try out every combination you feel would work, then reload once you find the right combination and only use that one. Still, it makes for a lot of forced trial and error gameplay as opposed to intelligent puzzle solving, which is another part of the reason why I didn't really enjoy this game, though I get why some people might find this intriguing. Now, it is possible to die in this game, though in most cases you'll have some sort of warning ahead of time, and you'll have to make a wrong move to actually trigger death to happen. In fact, the only Walking Dead scenario possible is if you head off to the final moments of the game without certain necessary items. But the game has unlimited save slots, so just keep a running log of saves and you should be okay. Another mechanic in the game which is neat but kinda underdone is the Amulet. Basically, early in the story, Brandon gets a magic amulet which can only be used by a person of royal blood, and is ultimately capable of performing 4 magical spells. Though when you first get it, the jewels on it will be blank and won't function. When you use a spell, you won't be allowed to use another until the effect wears off, or the amulet has time to recharge. I understand why they did this, given the lore of the game world, but at the same time, waiting for the amulet to recharge feels very arbitrary given what you use it for, and having to wait on it when you don't use it in the right way actually breaks the game's immersion. In terms of the puzzles themselves, there's a lot of trial and error in figuring them out, and most of the ones which don't require trial and error are so blatantly obvious, the only way they could be more obvious would be if a cluster of arrows pointed at which object you needed to use. Though I will say, I spent a solid hour trying to find the last rock of these caves, only to discover it was camouflaged on this screen, which in and of itself doesn't make a whole lot of sense given that I'm deep in a cave in a mountain right now, but hey, Magical Island, I can forgive something like this. Now, I didn't actually beat the game as I got really bored of it once I came up to the whole alchemy thing, as there's essentially 6 different kinds of potions you can make, 3 directly, 3 indirectly, and the moment I have to follow a walkthrough directly or waste many hours of time trying multitudes of combinations of things to figure out how to progress, that's when I lose interest, which is how it was with me here.
I did it! I made the flame! The concoction seems to be only half complete.
Unlike last week's game, which I couldn't stand because of its controls and difficulty, Legend of Kyrandia Book 1 is much simpler to play. It just has too much forced trial and error for my tastes. I feel that anyone who enjoys these types of adventure games will probably get a kick out of it, but if this style of game isn't your thing, then there isn't anything here that's going to change your mind. In fact, it may push you even further away given how difficult this game plays to others of its genre. Although you can leave cycles set to auto, you're going to notice certain aspects of the game move far faster than others. Turning the cycles count low enough to slow those animations down has a side effect though of slowing down everything else. So I recommend setting a fixed cycles count of 30,000, as this isn't too outrageous for the improperly timed things, and still allows normal gameplay to function the way it's supposed to. Also, if you're running a disc-based release, be certain you have the manual, because it happens to have manual-based copy protection, at least from what I understand, though the CD version has this copy protection stripped out. Anywho, that's all for this episode of Ancient DOS Games. Next week for episode 188, we're going to round off our look at inventory-based adventure games by taking a look at one of the best ones ever made. Seriously, that should be more than enough of a hint for you all, so be sure to send your guests to adg@pixelships.com and stay tuned to see for yourselves that, while inventory adventures aren't normally my cup of tea, there are still a few that I do happen to enjoy.
I can't see a thing in here. Uh-oh. Hello?